If you're new here, my name is RuthAnn. My husband Lance was a service-connected, disabled U.S. Navy veteran. He was sick for 25 of the 27 years we were together, and for the last 12 years of his life, I was his full-time caregiver. This podcast is about caregiving in all its forms. Today I have my friend Shawn here. He is back for the second episode, continuation of his unique story of caregiver to his neighbor, Robert. Last week, he told us about some pretty crazy things that happened. And this week, he's going to share some stories that you won't believe that led up to Robert being removed from his home. Thanks so much for being here, Shawn.
All right, good to be with you, RuthAnn. This story about what I have been through with my neighbor Robert and how I ended up, I don't know if I would call myself a caregiver or I kind of played that role, but it seemed like I kind of ended up in that position. So from where we left off in the last episode, it got to the point where Robert was such a danger to himself and others when he drove that my wife and I started getting his groceries and telling him he didn't have to go run his errands because we already did it for him. And so I would just get a list from him, get, everything on a list that he wanted. And then we would go and we'd go get it just to keep him off the road. But as the days went by, more things started happening in his home. It wasn't very long before I really needed some help in this. Now, the state we live in is not very good about intervening, or, I've had people say, well, why didn't you just turn him over to the state or whatever? Our state doesn't have anything in place to intervene or take care of a person in this situation. We do have an adult protective services, but they usually go into a home where an elderly person is being abused, but they don't generally go into a place and then, if they were to interview Robert on certain days or certain minutes or certain moments, he is completely coherent. He is able to tell you who the president is, what day it is, everything. And then they go, okay, he can make his own decisions. We can't take away his rights. So me as a former firefighter EMT, I knew about this already because I had seen other people kind of living in squalor and having dementia and things like that, and there was absolutely no safety net for them. So I got stuck in this situation because I didn't want something terrible to happen to him. If I were to just walk away, like a lot of my friends and family just said, you just need to leave that alone. And problem is he would have died, or died horribly, or he could have killed other people. So we got to the point where we started getting his groceries, and then after that, he became even more and more and more dependent on me, and it got so bad that I couldn't even work. I am a software developer, and I write software in my office, and so my hours are kind of flexible. But the problem is every single day I needed to go over to his house 3 miles away and check on him, and that cost me a lot of time, a lot of emotion, and half the time I wondered if he was really badly hurt or dead. I couldn't be over there all the time. So I got to the point where things became really dangerous very fast, and Robert wanted to drive again. So I knew about his son James. His son James, to this day, hasn't seen his dad in approximately 25 years. And when James was 15 years old, his mother and father got a divorce, and the relationship was really strained. And James was having a lot of problems himself. And the only time he really would contact his father is if he needed some money. And that's what Robert used to tell me. Even when I first met him, if the phone would ring and it was James, it was because, oh, he needs some money. But I was in a situation where I really felt like, okay, I don't have rights to do anything for this man. And second of all, I don't want to be the one calling the shots here. So when I was over there, I got a hold of Robert's phone and went through his contact list, and I found his son James's number. And then I went home and I gave him a call, and he answered. He's hard to get a hold of because he works a night shift all the time, so he has weird hours, so nobody can get a hold of him most of the time. But I talked with him, and James mentioned to me that he really thought his dad sounded off lately, and he was really wondering what was going on. But just to give you guys a fast forward in the future, to this day, James has never come and seen his dad. James is on the opposite side of the country. He's on the East Coast, we're on the West. And so, despite that, despite any problems that his son had personally, I just really needed James to step up and start calling the shots for this. And the very first thing I discussed with him is I said, I really need to do anything I possibly can to keep this man from driving, because he has been proving that he is such a danger to society and himself and everybody. Even my family, my kids are out on that road that Robert is traveling. And so James, he really stepped up. I wouldn't say he stepped up, like a kid probably should do, but at that moment, James went and got he made a statement, and he had it notarized and sent to me express that said, I have authorized Shawn to remove my dad's car keys, keep him from driving, and and anything else in the house that is a danger to my dad's life. And so I had that, but yeah, we can argue about the legal part of that some other day, but this was a situation where I had to act fast. So I'm going to tell you guys what I did. Right away, my wife and I, we went on Amazon, and we were able to order some key fobs to his two vehicles that were identical, but they weren't programmed. And that way, as soon as those came in, I got them shipped in right away. I also, when I was over there, I went under the hood of his cars and I disconnected the battery cables. But he is with it enough, he would have reconnected those. So that wasn't enough. So what I ended up doing was we got these dummy keys, and then we, when I could distract him, I'd be in his house and he's sitting on his recliner, he's talking about this or that or some show he's watching. I was over there secretly taking the legitimate car keys off and putting these dummy ones, and that way when he looked up there, he would know nothing's out of place. And if he were to go try start the car, that he wouldn't be able to start the car, and he would think there's just something wrong with the car. So we did that, and that was effective. That kept him from driving. But within his house, he started having even more bad things happen. A lot of situations. When I would go check on him every single day, I kept a journal of this. When I get back, some of this stuff was so unbelievable. I can't even believe it, even when I read it now. But I would go over there and I would see various things, things that were amiss. Like his coffee table was flipped upside down, and that was because he tripped, and he would fly over his coffee table, and he landed on a bowl and broke that, and he'd be all bloody. There'd be blood on the carpet. He had fallen through walls and doors. There were, his elbow would go right through the door. And of course, not only did I journal this, when I get back, I would write down what was going on, but I took photos of everything. And my hope was that at some point when I just needed somebody to believe me and how bad this was getting. But I can tell you guys, to this day, nobody has cared about those journals. I have presented them to the hospitals, everybody. Nobody cares. So that's the situation I'm in, but at least I have that as a record. Some of the other things that happened was, and I have really great pictures of this, but he started shuffling. he would shuffle his feet. He never really lift them up. He was just like this. And so he left a massively 2-track black trail from his recliner to the bathroom. He'd get up out of, watch TV, he'd get up out of the recliner, shuffle all the way to the bathroom, and he left like a little, it looked like a 2-lane highway, um, all the way to the bathroom. He also started having bathroom accidents. He also, when I first met him, he was such a prim and proper guy. Um, he was one of those almost 1950s attitude guys where if I was coming over, he'd have nice pants on, nice belt, nice button up shirt. His hair would be combed perfectly. He was a very prim and proper guy. But now we're in a situation I would show up and his fly would be down. He would answer the door and he wouldn't even know it. And his fly would be down and his parts are hanging out. And, um, there was a lot of stuff like that. And it was very unusual for him because he didn't even really realize it, and I would say, hey, put your animals back in the barn, and and he'd be embarrassed. And then there was there was another situation that was really making things worse, and that was because he had dementia, he wasn't properly eating. He had decent food. We brought him decent food, but then he said he wanted ice cream, so being we're a long ways away from the store, we always buy extra and stock up. He said he wanted like three things of ice cream. And so I'd give him those and say, okay, how much are you going to have in a day? And he's like, oh, I just have a little bit, but I would come back the next day and all three were gone. He'd have eaten all of them. And so I got to the point where I had to start counting what was missing and things like that, because he wasn't properly eating, he wasn't staying hydrated. And then the other thing is he was a creature of habit. He was a very healthy person, exercised all the time, and he always did a daily walk. And I encouraged him not to go out there, but yeah, there was a couple times when I came driving up and he's way out on the road. Or the one time where he had just fallen flat on his face. I mean, he came down just like that and slammed his face, and he had a black eye. And I had to go get his pickup truck because I couldn't get him on my ATV. So I had to go get a pickup truck and then get him up in it and take him to his house. And he's like, I'm fine. Because I've always wanted to get him help. And he had this mindset that hospitals were trying to kill him, and pharmaceutical drugs were poison. And he read all these books all of the time that said that. And so he was difficult because he was the opposite of one that liked getting help. And so I fought that and fought that and fought that. And, and there was a couple other incidences that occurred. It was winter time. He had a pellet stove where we load these wood pellets into the top of it and it would heat his house. He had a routine with that thing, and he would, each day he would let it cool down in the morning, and then he would vacuum it out and stuff like that. Well, in his dementia, he vacuumed out the hot ashes into the shop vac, and then the shop vac caught on fire in the house, and he could barely walk because he's shuffling, and he's dragging the shop vac by the hose over to the door, and he shoves it out of the house, and it's laying down there burning until it kind of went out. I had never seen a shop vac look like that except for on some of the fires I've been at. Just the plastic just mushed. But another time, so I got him a replacement shop vac and told him to stop doing that. So he got better about not vacuuming hot ashes, but then one time he took the shop vac and dumped it out in his kitchen sink and clogged the whole thing up, and he didn't understand why his kitchen sink was clogged. So there was a lot of little things and incidences like that were just a real problem. And then he also started not knowing the difference between fantasy and reality. As far as he watched TV, he was watching Law and Order one time, and I came in, I knocked on the door, he didn't answer, and so I just kind of peeked in, and he was there, and he said he was talking about one of the little boys on there. He's like, "Eh," and he was in tears. He didn't realize that Law and Order was not a real show. Like it really didn't happen, but he was really shook up about that. And in the past, he would have known the difference. The other thing that was really a real big problem was he started losing track of time, as far as what time of day it is and things like that. He would wake up in the middle of the night and wander around, and he would try to call me, at 12:30 or 1 in the morning, and not know why the sun is not up. Um, so that became a point where my wife and I think it was you, Ruth Ann, had mentioned the dementia clock, and so we went on Amazon and purchased one of those and got it hanging on his wall. And of course, everything that happened, I took pictures of, even when we got the dementia clock. And he then could see that it would say right on the clock if it's morning or afternoon or evening, or and then what day it is, day of the week, because he a lot of times didn't even know what day of the week it was. But um, this got really bad, and later, just to give you a flash forward in the future, when he is examined, just put this in context, we really didn't know how much of a percentage of this problem was from him having an Alzheimer's or a Parkinson's, or one of the cardiologists that examined him later believed that he may have had one or two mini strokes. So we don't know fully what all was going on in his situation, why he deteriorated so bad so quickly, and it might have been amplified by improper diet and weird sleeping habits and things like that. There may have been a lot more at play here, but you got to understand that I've been to so many heart attacks, stroke calls, and things like that. I recognize that he had no facial droop. He had nothing to let me know that he had a stroke when I had seen him. So I don't understand what all was going on. And plus, he was kind of a health nut. He liked to take alternative things, and so he used to have 50 different things that he would take a little this and that, herbs and different things I kind of thought were questionable. And so he also in his dementia could have been mixing some of those things improperly and ingesting them. I don't know what all was going on. Like I said, I didn't live there with him, so I only got part of the picture. So yeah, things got really bad, and the effect it had on me was I was really not able to work because I was so worried. And then, like I said, when I make that 3 mile journey over there, I just had almost trauma, thinking that I'm going to find him and dead on the floor or something like that. So yeah, things got really bad, and I just needed it to end at some point, and I just didn't know how to end it. There was no getting him to agree to anything.
This is such a wake up call to people, but you did say that things were getting worse and you were reaching your breaking point. Can you tell us what happened?
I forgot it was how many months it was into this. I think it was like 2 or 3 months of dealing with this at his home, where he was in a really bad state, where something had to end. Well, when I went over to check on him one day, I knocked on the door and he did not answer. And so I got this sinking feeling. So I had a key to his back door. So I let myself in, and I came in, and there was these legs kind of sticking out from the doorway on the floor. And so I went and looked in his bedroom, and he was laying on his stomach, and his head was crammed, forward in the corner, and he was naked. And I said, Robert, are you okay? Because I knew he was alive. He was moving a little bit, and he goes, yeah, I'm just sleeping. And I just thought, man, and he also during this period of time he started losing the ability to keep his balance and walk and things like that. It was really bizarre, how he went from walking to not being able to walk. Um, but he could sort of walk. And when he was nourished with food and drink, he could just walk around. But so it was just really weird. But he just wanted me to help him up. I said, I want to call. I want to get some help. He's like, no, I don't want him. He's, real defiant about it. And so I had to kind of help him up. And I was thinking this is really bad. And I stayed with him quite a long time that day, after he got dressed and got him settled in, made sure he ate some meals and things, called his son and informed him of everything. And like I said, James was more of a person that, he was like, when he'd hear more terrible things his dad did or whatever. But he wasn't much for being able to come and provide any help whatsoever to me. So I was kind of on my own, other than just keeping James in the loop, because that would come into play later. It'd be very important. But anyway, this all finally came to a head the day after. It was May 6th of 2021. And, how do I remember that? Because it was the day it ended, that saga. Now, something else would happen after that, but this is the environment he was in until. All right, so on May the 6th, I went over there. I was pretty worried, and I knocked on the door and he did not answer. I let myself in his house. I could not find him. I looked everywhere. And then I went back to his bedroom and I heard a moan and some kind of weird breathing. And I went over on the other side of his bed, which is real narrow, really narrow. But on the other side of his bed, there was a dresser and he was naked again, which is not like him. He was face down. His head was purple because he wasn't breathing enough. And I shook him. I said, Robert, and he's like, just help me on the bed, get me some coffee and I'll be fine. And I had to get over the top of him and lift him up, onto the bed, which was not easy because he was limp. And I got him on the bed and put a bed sheet over him, and I just pleaded with him. I almost started crying because I couldn't do this anymore. And I told him that, and I said, we need to find out what's wrong. I said, you can't tell me something's not wrong with you. I mean, no normal person is having all these things happen. Will you please let me get some help? I know these guys that are going to come. I was on the fire department with them. I know them. They're not going to hurt you. They're going to try to help you. They're going to at least take a look at what's going on. And that was kind of, I don't call it, well, it's not really a half truth, but it was kind of, I had to upsell that so he would let his guard down. And so he kind of nodded his head in agreement, and then I just jumped on it right away. I just directly called the fire chief and said, hey, this is Shawn. I've got one here and I need to get stuff rolling. And so he went ahead and got the helicopter launched, and he made his way out with another firefighter. They got there, now all of a sudden I was so emotional because I had been dealing with this, and a lot of people didn't believe how bad this situation had become. And it also was nothing I could really do about it. There was really no help for this. And so all of a sudden these men came in, and it was just good to have help. I came in and I wasn't alone. And they took a look at him and his situation, and they just started documenting things. And the next thing you know, the helicopter came and landed right in the yard. And when the paramedics came in, they saw that he was critical because he had maybe been on the floor for 18 hours in that situation and may not have been even had full oxygen because his head was face down in the carpet. But yet he was just talking with them and arguing with them a little bit, but they got him flown away. And they took him to the hospital, and that ended that chapter of this story. Now, this story will continue, and there are more challenges ahead, especially with the caregiving homes and things like that. But this was the portion where he was living on his own, and we just all felt helpless. We did the best we could, but we felt helpless until help arrived.
As you're telling these stories, the whole time I'm thinking, you're not even related to this man. You're his neighbor, and how you became his caregiver and advocate because there was just nobody else to do it. And I know from experience how exhausting that is. And I could feel your pain and just your relief at having somebody else there to take care of the situation. And I think what I would like to say is, especially to our generation, Gen X, our parents are aging and they're stubborn and they want to be left alone. They want to live on their own. We all want to be independent. But you think about situations like this, and is that something that you really want to go through? Is that something that you want your parents to go through? So I think we need to start having more conversations and being honest with our parents, and just the elderly in general, that they need to do more things, even though they want to be independent. It's not always safe. Well, we'll continue this conversation on our next episode, and Shawn's going to share a few more stories, and we're going to talk a little bit more about dementia and protecting the patient. So thanks a lot for sharing all of this, Shawn, and thank you for everything that you've done to care for Robert, especially because you had no ties to him except that he was your neighbor.
Well, it was sometimes hard to look back and remember some of this stuff. It was a little bit traumatic, but I'm really glad I can get it out there and maybe make somebody out there feel like they're not alone if they have a relative doing crazy things, things that are just out of character for them. They don't make sense. I'm hoping if anybody hears this story, they can either say, "Hey, at least my situation isn't that bad," and that's a help, or they can understand that this is a terrible thing when they get dementia or Alzheimer's. It's a terrible disease. It's a terrible thing to watch your loved one change. And so it was my pleasure to share this.
I think one of the hard things too is when they downplay the things that are happening, and that can be so dangerous. So we'll talk about that in another episode. Thanks again, Shawn, and I'll see you next time.
All right. See you later.